Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the Infinite Way, where spirituality meets humanity. And today we continue our journey with Carlos Concepcion and part 4 of LaserEduLogics, Liberate Your Mind and Body with Liberal Arts, Yoga, and the Kabbalah. And we left off last session talking about in depth the viewpoint of the Kabbalah from the studies of Abilio, teacher Abilio. And Carlos, I just want to welcome you and just have you say hello, but I want to start you off with a question.
Hello, and good day to everyone. Happy to be here.
And so excited to have you. And you know, you really set a beautiful tone in terms of helping us to understand the Kabbalah from the perspective, knowing that we can only deep dive, but so much because it's a huge, 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 huge topic. People have studied the Kabbalah for years and years and years and years and years. But thank you for helping us to understand. And I'd like to dive back into grammar and language, okay? Or we really went through the understanding and the truth about the nature of language as it pertains to metaphysics and language arts, and the relationship between language and metaphysics. And so understanding that we have these parts, the spelling, the grammar, the rhetoric, the logic, that all lends to the effectiveness. I'd love to deep dive into the nature of language and then how we build upon it in order to reach the Quadrivium. Because it's not necessarily clear. And I talked to you a little bit before the broadcast, and I'll share it now. Like, for example, we have books like The Three Initiates, where people will read it. But are we getting the Quadrivium aspect of that? Because it's exactly what it is. It talks about the three initiates, but it has the layers by which you can read in for that spiritual understanding versus the literal understanding. So would you share with us a little bit about the nature of language and how it's built in order to read sacred texts?
Absolutely. Excellent question. And this goes to the core of what we call the initiatic colleges. And it's something that Dr. de la Ferrière brought us when he came and opened up his first ashram in Venezuela, where I was nurtured, where I went to. And his idea was, or is, in fact, the opening of the initiatic colleges, which were formerly closed for a few thousand years. And normally, I mean, traditionally, these mysteries, the mysteries of language, starting with that, the mysteries of number, the mystery of forces of nature and how we are composed, how we're constituted, our body, our soul, our spirit, the constitution of man, all of these knowledges, right, were taught in these mystery schools. They were called mystery schools, of course, because it was a time in which the knowledge cannot be given openly. It had to be initiated into these mysteries, into these schools, to be granted right to receive the revelation. But this has to do a lot with cosmic cycles. And when you study these cosmic cycles, you'll see eras in which there are golden eras, there's eras in which the knowledge then kept in the golden eras, the knowledge is given out freely. It's open. And in the dark ages, okay, a golden era is an age of light, right? Like light is associated with the sun is associated with gold, and but the dark ages are called are associated with the closing of these initiatic colleges, right? So there are moments in history where these colleges, these initiatic college mystery schools, open up their doors to receive new disciples, the ones that the masters that are in preparation that are now then going to go out to the world and direct the course of history, direct the course of humanity. We went into there's called the yugas in the East, in the sacred science of the Hindus, they call it the yugas, right? The Kali Yuga is the dark age. The Satya Yuga is the age of the golden age. So it's the golden age or lunar age, copper age, and then there is a iron or lead age, the age of darkness. The Kali Yuga, which we are now ending, according to Dr. Laferriere, who was also astronomer, astrologer, and mathematician, he calculated that the age of the Kali Yuga ended with that cycle of the Dark Age ended in 1948, and we emerged what he calls the Satya Yuga, the Golden Age, and it coincides with the Platonic year of Plato. Plato created this, and this is where the Quadrivium clarifies this astronomical rhythm of how the universe works and how we work, society and civilization. This is called part of the grand era. Just like we have seasons, right? We have the spring, summer, fall, winter, and those are the four seasons. We also have four seasons in what we call the Satya Yuga, Tetra Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and the Kali Yuga. And so the winter or the dark age has ended for humanity. And these courses, I'm not going to go into the Kali Yuga cycles because it's a high mathematical system, but just simply saying that they take thousands of years. And it coincided when we talked about the master slave cycle and how that was initiated. That came with the Kali Yuga, which was started about 6,000 years ago. And so now we can see once we get initiated into these colleges, all these sciences are now revealed to us in a systematic and organized fashion. So, but the learning of these mystery schools was always based, of course, for a long time it was orally based. Okay, before the cuneiform tablets were revealed, or given to us from the Babylonians, the Assyrians, okay, which is the first known recorded, in the first recorded history of language. It was oral. The tradition was oral, was not written down. Okay, as far as we can see, but of course, we could go back, thousands of years, I'm talking 10, 20,000, 25,000 years. There's an esoteric history book on that. But the point is that when the history went from oral tradition, which the knowledge was handed oral from mouth to ear, and this is what the Kybalion or the Kybalion, the three initiates actually start when the ears the wise is ready, the lips of wisdom come and inform the ear. So that's the Kabbalah as well, the transmission from the mouth of the master to the ear of the disciple. But that was the oral tradition. Once the knowledge was documented, inscribed in tablets, the language now started to become the vehicle to enshrine the tradition. And this is where the language, then language becomes the memory in which the tradition is inscribed. Okay, so this starts, of course, about 7,000 years ago with the Babylonian cuneiform tablets.
Right.
And so, but what has happened was I have illustrated in one of my books, took about 300 years to go from visual, because there was visual knowledge that was conveyed, right, through pictures and,
Symbols. Yes.
right? And so
Right.
now it went to verbal, from the visual to the verbal, once it became an alphabet. And it took the Babylonians about 300 years to evolve that, to convert their visual. This is why you see in the Egyptian temples, you see all these picture hieroglyphs, okay? And so, but that once that knowledge became alphabetized, now we have a structural written form in which the word of God, the verb, okay, the knowledge can now be inscribed. And that became the basis for the development of the human brain. I don't know, some people may be familiar with Dr. Rudolf Steiner's works. He created one of the most successful school systems in the world today, but he was a leading master of the early part of the 20th century.
Mhm.
And he states, he was also a liberal artist. He also universally educated a psychic master of the esoteric world. And he said one of the basic reasons for the development of language was for the brain to be developed. So what happened was, at the beginning, we were so close to the cosmic womb, we could see the angels. In the Bible, it says we could see the sound, you see. And so we were psychically connected to the universe and to the cosmic womb. Okay. The angels that formed us, the angels of light, or the hierarchy of the light beings that created man, were intimately connected. But in order to give man the freedom and the independence, it's like a mom and a dad first nurture their baby until he can grow and walk for himself. Right? We carry the baby, then we let the baby go on its own and try to stand up and walk. Then they become at 7, they create this capability to reason. This is the reasoning faculty kicks in around 7, because the brain now has all the wiring necessary to be able to reason. This is when they go to school. That's the reason why we start school, elementary school, at 7 years old, because that's the year that the brain has sufficiently developed the objective thinking faculty to be able to reasoning, the neurons to be able to do the literary work. Okay, so what now has happened is, according to Rudolf Steiner, who was a psychic, he actually saw this. He said the angels that nurture mankind, and this is in the Bible as well, they distanced themselves. They created a distance to allow man to now become independent. And this is why then writing became the tutor of a man's brain development. And to give him the freedom, because remember, in the hierarchy, there's 10 hierarchies. Oh, or rather, there's 10 levels in the hierarchy of angels, from seraphim to angels, which is the 9th category, the Hayot HaKodesh, we call it in Kabbalah, the hierarchy of the angelic host, of which the King of Kings, they all serve the King of Kings. So from the seraphims all the way down to the angels, they're 9 spheres. The 10th sphere is man. Okay, man, or say mankind, humanity. And so the idea is that we have to rise now, because the angelic host that was guiding humanity, right, to develop and to do its mission on earth, now distance itself so that man can now become independent and be a 10th living representative of that universal hierarchy. Okay, so how does this happen? Okay, once the angels they're separated from mankind or distanced themselves so that man gave man the freedom to develop, now we have the process of development. And this is why reasoning became the instrument of development. And you see, reasoning is a divisive instrument. It's a separative instrument. It distinguishes, separates, it categorizes. And so, but intuition, on the other hand, is what connects the living spirit to the reasoning. Okay, so now the reasoning is given to us through language. Okay, and so once the cuneiform tablets were given, now the alphabet started to grow, the formalization of the grammar rules and the Egyptians and then the Hebrews. Now Hermes represents three Mehistus. That's why they call it the three initiate. But in reality, it's three initiatic tradition or schools or streams of this tradition, of this transmission, this esoteric knowledge. These three schools were Egyptian, one was Egypt, the other one was Hebrew, and the other one was Hebrew, Greek, and Egyptian. This is why you see that in Alexandria, okay, which became the epicenter, the biggest universal library, the Library of Alexandria, that collected all the wisdoms and all the knowledges, written knowledge, mind you, was housed in this great library called the Alexandria Library. It was
Right.
it was created by Alexander the Great, who conquered most of Europe at that time, right? And so he conquered Egypt, and Alexandria was part of Egypt. And this is where they created hundreds of thousands of textbooks, okay, or the collection of all, and these were all manuscripts, of course. There were rolls written. There was no printing press back then. It was all these, but that this in Alexandria is where all the knowledge converged. Okay, and so this is where Euclid, this is where Pythagoras, then all the knowledge that Pythagoras had gathered from Egypt and all the world, that's where it was housed. Okay, and so this is where Aristotle, I remember that Alexander the Great was a disciple of Aristotle. So he inherited that knowledge. And so he created this library so then all that knowledge can now be formalized. And this is where we get the first formalization, in fact, of the Pythagorean quadrivium, but also the trivium. All of this was there. And so and this is where the value of the written tradition now becomes established in a formal library. And of course, you know, people that we're still in the middle or we're still immersed in what we call the Kali Yuga. So the Kali Yuga, of course, is an age of darkness. In the midst, there's this light, because it's like the yin and yang. You know, in the midst of darkness is a point of light. And in the point of light, in the circle of light, in the point of light, there's a little point in the circle of light, there's a point of darkness. And that's the balance, the yin-yang balance in nature. And so in the midst of the Kali Yuga, there was this point of light. And this was the Library of Alexandria. Okay. And so this was where all the great work was established, where the three schools met, the Hermetic school of Egypt, right, where the Alexandria Library is housed, and the Hellenic, the Greeks with their intelligence came to formalize all this knowledge and be inherited, and then the school of the Hebrews, who inherited that knowledge base. Okay, so this is where it all from Egypt in Alexandria. If you study the Hebrew tongue restored, Father Olive has a wonderful excerpts about how the Bible, in fact, was created. One of the main versions of the Bible was created from there, from the masters of the library. And so you can see the vectors of knowledge and wisdom that was grounded in this space. Now, of course, with the when the Romans came in, And there was then, of course, they wanted to destroy, and they did. They burned it down. They burned down a lot of these documents, right? But the cat was out of the bag. The formalization had already happened. And so the knowledge was then dispersed. When the barbarians came in and destroyed the Library of Alexandria, what happened to the knowledge base? Well, guess what? The Arabians, the Arabs, inherited that knowledge, and they kept it, and they transmitted. That's how the Arabian Empire emerged. The golden era in Arab research. That's where we get our algebra. The Arabs inherited. They translated those works of Plato and Aristotle. And they created a golden era in the Arab space. And then, of course, they went to war with the Christians because the Christians went into a dark era when they rejected that knowledge base.
Yes.
Those who accept the knowledge base flourished. And then the ones who rejected it would submerge into a dark age. That's what happens to the barbarians. The Romans who got overtaken by a certain facet of the Christians. This is what we call the medieval age. When, because they had lost, they forgot what was housed in the Alexandria Library, while the Arabs were cherishing it and translating it and spreading it and distributing it. The Christians went and they persecuted, okay, and they destroyed with the help of the Romans, of course, because remember the Romans became Christianized. Okay, so that now I don't want to get too much into that history because that's a topic to itself.
Right,
We're going to stay with the knowledge, the history of language, and how through these three schools or the mystery schools. Okay, the Egyptian school, the Hebrew school, and the Greek school. This is yes.
And I want to ask just a quick question right there too, because as we talk about this does not mean every language either. Okay,
No.
like gave me the gift of being able to read the Hebraic tongue restored. So Hebrew was one of those languages that actually held that secret language or that sacred language for our civilization. Sanskrit being another one. And there's only like 3 or 4 languages that actually held that sacred language.
Yes, Chinese, all the languages. This is where Fabre d'Olivet really hit the spirit of language. And the reason was because he connected, he said, with the university, he discovered, thanks to his master, Court de Gebelin, he understood the universal grammar. And so Hebrew is only one access ramp, as you can see. It's one school that gives you access to this universal system of knowledge. Chinese is another through the I Ching. And for 5,000 years before, he already is systematized. The language of zeros and ones in quadrivium mathematics comes from the I Ching. It was already inscribed in that system. Only they didn't translate it into a calculus, a binary. This Leibniz did that in the 16th century. But you see, it's all connected. And so, and the Sanskrit, they inherited Ram. By the way, it was a Western. Ram came from Europe, and he brought that knowledge to the Indians. So the tradition is all connected in this universal language. And by the way, Pantajali, who again was the master of the architect of the system, the 8-limb yoga, the eightfold yoga system that we know today, right? He was the formalizer of the yoga system. Yoga has been known for tens of thousands of years, but it was more in the shamanic culture. It wasn't formalized. It was Pantajali who formalized it. And he was a disciple of Panini. Who was Panini? He was the first grammarian in recorded history. Panini. Okay? And this was discovered by Chomsky, by the way. I discovered this through Chomsky. Panini formalized the grammar rules, okay, for Sanskrit. And this is why in yoga, you see all the letters, each chakra is inscribed with the Sanskrit alphabet, 49.
Yes.
You see that? Just like in Hebrew, you have the 22 Hebrew letters that correspond to 22 chakras.
Right.
The whole system is based on 22 chakras. And so the language has always been intimately connected with the development of man. Now, only when you go into the universal grammars that you start seeing the connection. And this is what Fabre d'Olivet did. He said he could have done the universal grammar through Chinese. He could have done the universal grammar. He could have illustrated the principles of universal grammar through Sanskrit. And this is the introduction that he does in Hebrew Tongue Restored.
Yes.
To illustrate, these are just access ramps. See, not all languages can give you or do give you access to this universal principle. And this is why the sacred languages are so important. You see, the sacred languages are designed to put you in touch, to connect you with the universal source. The particular languages are designed to limit the capability to just that particular region in which you are developing. You see, but to understand the universe, to understand the universality of your being, you need access to that universal grammar. And so what Fabre d'Olivet was, he chose the Hebrew. Why? Because the Hebrew language was closer to the Western tradition. And he was speaking to a Western audience. You see, we're based on the Western tradition is based on the Judeo-Christian tradition. And so to understand our tradition or our cultural heritage, our spiritual and cultural heritage, we need to understand the Hebrew language. And this is why he chose that. He said, look, I could illustrate the principles of universality, of universal grammar through Chinese. And that's exactly what he showed some ideas about that. He said, eventually, we should come to that. And by the way, Raimundo Abellio's system shows you the connection between Kabbalah, the Hebrew Kabbalah, and the I Ching, because they're all connected. And Sanskrit, of course, the yoga.
Yes.
Because it's all connected at that level. You see, once you go beyond the limitations of the particular biases that are created in those particular languages, then you can see the connection there is between the culture and between the different languages, all of them, because they all obey one universal principle, right? That rules the universe. And so I wanted to go back to the Alexandrian center because this is where Hermes connected, the Hermes Trismegistus, the three great, and this is what we call the three initiates, the three initiatic colleges. Okay, they rule the Western mystery schools. That did not exclude, of course, the Sanskrit. And the reason is because these are the regions that got affected. You know, the Europeans inherited that knowledge, right? Including the Arabs. We're not talking about Arabian, but if you go into the Arab language, you're going to see some of that in the Hebrew tongue restored. There's a correspondence, you see, to all these languages. So it's not just a preference or a bias that we choose the Hebrew over Sanskrit, over Chinese, over Arab, Arabian languages. No, they're all connected, but you need to get access to that universality, and you have to choose a form that you're most how you say designed for, that you're most acclimated to. Okay.
Right.
And once you do that, you'll see the connection between all the languages. And this is what Fabre d'Olivet does. This is why El Maestre, Dr. de la Ferriere, and Abellio, they chose that because he gives you that ramp, that access to that universal grammar. And very few actually do give you access to that universal grammar. Not Chomsky doing that advanced work. Yes.
Right. And it's amazing that we find that this is the foundation, this is the commonality between them all in order to have the learning and the access points to the Quadrivium. Because you have to find the foundation and the access points. So Fabrique Olivart Olive, am I saying, I'm trying to pronounce the name, Fabre Olive, really does a wonderful job in his forward, bringing it all together so that you have a basic understanding of why they're the access points and what the commonalities are based on those access points. One of the questions that I have is that, so we look at, for example, Moses.
Yes.
Moses was acquired, and you gave this example before, by the queen that was already in play, and he was raised by the queen of Egypt. And so here it is. He is submitted into school.
Mm-hmm.
And it's built upon. And then I want to relate this back to our audience, because there are very few religions that actually ensure that their children understand this logic, this rhetoric, this communication, and everything. And it just it just dawned on me that, you know, some of my Jewish friends would be going to Hebrew school. But Hebrew school was not just to learn the Kabbalah and not just to learn the language of Hebrew, but they were learning the access points. They were building the trivium and the quadrivium as children, raising so that they could access that higher level of thinking. And then by the time they were old enough to study the Kabbalah, they had built upon that the ability to comprehend and access through Hebrew what the Kabbalah had to offer.
Yes, yes.
And so when I look back at that, and I look back at the fact that all the way back down to Moses, and even prior to Moses, Jesus, all of these people who went to mystery schools, what is the gap that we're missing? And I understand it's the quadrivium and the trivium, but what is it that is being built upon that we're missing? Because I'm looking at the sacred text, and then I look at the text that, you know, everybody prides themselves, oh, I read the Emerald Tablets, oh, I read the Key of Enoch, but these are perfect examples of literature that is spread to the masses, but maybe, I don't know, and I'm just picking a number out of my head, 20% of the mass really truly understand what it unlocks.
Yeah, and what's missing, in fact, are the mystery schools, the initiatic colleges. They're not mystery school because there's no more real mystery in that sense, in the sense that it's hidden. Now it's revealed. The knowledge is all given. In the age of Aquarius, the knowledge era opened up. The key word for Aquarius is I know. The knowledge is revealed. In other words, it's given. This is what in the Bible we call the revelation. But the problem is that we're now just entering this age, so there's a confusion because there's so much knowledge being spread, like over the internet. The internet is a key distributor of this new knowledge that is erupting. The question now is, how do we assimilate all this knowledge? How do we systematize and organize how do we teach? How do we form? We need these initiatic colleges to give us the way to master the esoteric knowledge and the exoteric knowledge. See, because in the dark era, we went to one side, which was, we needed to cultivate the ability of man to survive in the world, right? So we will focus outside the development of the, cultivation of land and property and all these externalities that were necessary in order for us to, house ourselves. So we separated the like we said, the transitive knowledges, the transitive activity of the mind from the intransitive. So we went outward to build. Now we're reaching a culmination of that, and now we have to go back inside. But the way to do it is through a system of knowledge. We need these initiatic colleges. And we have the blueprint for them, but they're still not fully operational in the world because we're still dominated by these external schools, what we call the exoteric schools of knowledge. But one of the prophecies of Abelio is the end of esotericism. In other words, the mystery schools that kept the knowledge hidden, now have come out and are now available to mankind so that we can now put them to work so that there's no separation between the exoteric schools, the colleges, the elementary schools, and all that, and the esoteric schools, which is where the real mystery of man is hidden, it's kept, the real power. And so now there's what we call the phasing out of this separation between the externalities and the internal, and the inward knowledge and the outward knowledge. We need both, you see? And so
Yes.
we need the formalization that the schools have learned to do, that give us in colleges, and the interiorization, the assimilation, the inward mastery of these programs, of this knowledge, but we needed to know, sort it out, sort of get all the vectors, where they come from, and how all this knowledge comes together. This is what the Dr. Laferriere brought us, this initiatic college where we can now, we inherited the wisdom of the ages, and we inherited the scientific exoteric knowledge of our colleges, and now we can bring them together to create a complete system of knowledge where no more fragmentized, underdeveloped ways of teaching that keep people, ignorant of who they are. So basically, that's the project, that we're working on. What's missing in all this flurry of information that you see over the internet is an organizing knowledge principle. And this is where knowledge management comes in. This is why I chose Peter Drucker, who's the father of modern management, but modern knowledge management. He opened up a whole new era for America. He's the architect of American superpower. Remember, America was chosen at the beginning of the knowledge era, in 1945, when the United Nations was formed. Where was it formed? It was formed in New York City. And who was the leader in forming it? It was Eleanor Roosevelt, with her humanitarian principles of the respect for human rights, and Roosevelt, who created the universal economic principles for liberty and equality and fraternity. You see, and these are what we call Masonic principles.
Okay.
Where Dr. Laferriere was a Freemason, and most people don't realize that the blueprint, the Constitution of the United States, was written by, in great majority, by these Freemasons, including George Washington, who was a master Mason. Why? Well, this is how the mystery schools converge in America. The city of Washington, and I'll send you a wonderful visual study that an architect did on the internet about the aerial Google view of all of Washington, and how it was designed with all these Masonic principles, all these Masonic symbols, which are Egyptian, including our monument. The Washington Monument is the obelisk, which comes from Egypt. And you see that obelisk in Paris, you see it in Israel, you see it in every major city, you see it in Central Park, New York, everywhere you're going to see the obelisk. And what is the obelisk? It's the symbol of fertility, of creativity, of energy. The male principle, the Osiris principle, the jet. This is Osiris phallus. And on the interior design, you see a vertex, you see the vesica Pisces, which is the symbol of the female womb, the female vagina. And you see, all of this is in the center of our culture. But if you don't learn to read symbols, if you don't have the history of where all these symbols come from, you get
lost.
What they mean. Yeah, we get lost in conspiracy theories, we get lost in nonsense, because we don't have the sense to understand the interpretive framework, you see. And so the fathers of the American system inherited that they created America, a prosperous America, because they gave us the foundation in symbolic forms, in linguistic forms, and in architectural forms. All of this is already in there. It's already established. And this is why in 1945, the United States was chosen to be the first superpower of the age of Aquarius. And the knowledge
Yeah.
era opens up. Okay. And where in my book, we go into precisely why MIT is the architect of not only America's superpower, but global superpower. And
Yes, and
that,
you make a wonderful,
uh-huh,
wonderful comment, or you make a wonderful, wonderful position
uh-huh,
point on that when you talk about FDR and how FDR's impact when he liberated using his position to
mhm,
let knowledge be a source of wealth. And I love that quote. Knowledge is a source of wealth.
yeah,
So, he opens the door, he starts bringing in Pell grants, TAP grants, different grants for people to be able to gain access to where the information might be privatized, to gain
yeah,
access and open the door for certain information to no longer be privatized,
that's right.
and basically impacts everything. And if you could talk to us a little bit of maybe about the Bay-Dole Act.
Oh, wow. That's, you got me. This is interesting. This is fantastic because now we're entering the role of America. Now we went from Alexandria to the new Alexandria.
Right.
In fact, became America. Why did America become a superpower in after World War II? Well, this didn't happen out of it wasn't haphazard. There was a reason America was prepared for that role. And it took almost 200 years to do that. Started
Mhm.
with Washington and the value of the seven liberal arts that are enshrined in the Masonic school. And this is one of the mystery schools that rules America, okay, or the foundations of America. The seven liberal arts are the foundation. Now, what happened is they call it the ladder of the mystery. Okay,
Mhm.
so now we have the establishment of knowledge as the ruler of the age. Knowledge became, remember, before the World War II, when FDR took power, America was in poverty, but it was impoverished by private power. Okay. And the exclusive manipulation of the raw resources by private power. In the new age, there's a balance between private power and public power. It's
Mhm.
like health, has to be a balance. Private
Yeah.
is the individual, the social is the collective. The collective has to help the individual, and the individual has to contribute to the collective. There's a balance. But that balance is very hard to accomplish. Why? Because if you give too much power to the private becomes a dictator.
Yes.
If you give too much power to the collective, it becomes a communist system. And then the individual is crushed. And so the whole becomes it's a delicate balance that needs to be created. That can only come from a high and highly educated system that enables that. And this is what Roosevelt started to do. Okay, he created the conditions for empowering the social work. Inherited the social security system to give the old people the power to retire, and he gave us the Fannie Mae Act that enabled,
Yes.
banks did not give people loans unless you were rich. You didn't get a loan. It was collateralized. Well, the government, FDR said, look, the government will collateralize the loans. And this is why people can now take a loan, and the middle class exploded. We had the first middle class country in history. Okay. Thanks to, because wealth started to build once you buy a house, now you have equity. That equity
Yeah.
allows you to borrow, and that borrow you can invest. And that investment is what created the wealth of the middle class. But the real wealth starts with knowledge. And this is what FDR did. He created the educational system, the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, the National Science Foundation, the public school system that needed the financing, and the Pell Grants and the tuition assistance programs. It started with the GI Bill. See, the GI Bill was the first act, okay, that in 1944, that enabled 7 million soldiers that came back from the war to get free education. And what was that really? It was access to higher education. Previous to World War II, people did not go to college. The standard was high school. And only the rich went to college. And of course, all throughout history, that's always been the case. The aristocracy, the nobles, the rich people were the only ones that had access to higher. You see that? So that cycle was broken for the first time in history with FDR. Why? Because he gave that to 7 million soldiers. What happened in World War I? All those soldiers that came after World War I, you know what they did? They went back to their farms. Did they develop engineering skills? Did they develop lawyer skills and medical skills?
Not.
Did they develop their no, they all went back. It was high school. They never went beyond that because there was no grants for that. There was no collective political condition to allow them to develop to the next stage. FDR said, this is it. We have to bring the power to the people. Okay. And the way you bring the power to the people is by giving them access to knowledge. Let them develop. America became a superpower and the #1 most powerful nation. We're bigger and more powerful than Rome could ever imagine. We know the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire. Look at all these empires. They were local. I mean, Romans, where did they dominate? There are a few countries in Europe. America has military bases in 130 countries. And that network of military bases, what does it protect? What is its mission? Well, guess where the internet came from? The military industrial system, which was designed to convert money, public money, into electronics. That's where the computer came from. That's where the lasers came from. That's where the network, the internet came from. And if you study that history carefully, you'll see that it's a system designed to convert money, public money, into knowledge. Okay? And so first it was electronics, now it's photonics. But it's the same, and it's knowledge that is distributed. It's not egotistical. It's open. This is why MIT did what it did. It opened everything because they were responsible. Who did FDR hired to architect? It was the president of MIT, Vannevar Bush, computer scientist and engineer, who a mathematician who inherited the policies, converted the policies that Roosevelt wanted to architect. He became the architect of American, of harnessing the power, engineering power. And it gets better because let me tell you, America became the vector for the migration of the greatest intellectual power in history. People think, if you go back to World War I and World War II, who were persecuted? You know, Hitler's greatest mistake. What was his greatest mistake? Germany was the epicenter of the Weimar Republic, was the epicenter, the epitome of flowering of human knowledge. Okay, this is the Weimar Republic, okay, 1920s. And what was the greatest mistake they did? They reached the epitome in science, in culture, in philosophy, in sociology, in psychology. If you look at all the great minds of the 20th century, most of them were housed where? Einstein, Husserl. Where were they? They were in Germany.
Germany, yes.
You see? But what did Germany do? Germany was a whole bunch of little countries separated. You know, they were the Prussian. They were who unified Germany? It was Bismarck. In 1961, he collected, he unified, he created the first rake. And you know what he did? He instituted the social security. He instituted public education at a higher level, college, universal college access. He was the one, and you know what? And he created what they call the National Economic Innovative System. And you know where he got it from? America. Because in America, under Hamilton, we created this endogenous development system, and that's how we separated from England. It was the connection between the national innovation system was created that if we educate the public, and this is where we created the public schools to empower, because the way it was to give the power to the people. The way you give the power to the people is through education. And so the Virginia, this is where Hamilton created what we call the National Innovative System, and that's the connection between colleges. Innovation starts in universities. This is where research and development happens. That power, that creativity, then is transferred to industry, private industry, then takes that knowledge. And to answer your question, this is where the Bayh-Dole Act comes in. The Bayh-Dole Act was because we knew that in colleges is where the knowledge is created. Okay, this is what we learned from Germany. Okay, the power is created in the university. They create the engineering power, the military power, the chemistry, the physics, the mathematics, all of that. And then that's transferred to private industry. Private industry then takes that knowledge and puts it in productivity, and it produces the things that society needs. This is the productive engine of society.
Right.
And so, and the government has to finance this with the collective treasury of the people. The responsibility of the government is to empower the people through universities, through schools. The power that comes out is then given to the private industry so that they can then innovate and create. And this is why America prospered. Okay. So and so what happened? That system is called the tri system. Okay, it's a three system institution, three major institutions of society. Okay,
is it the triple helix? Is that the triple helix system?
The triple helix, exactly. Thank you for reminding me. Exactly, that's what we call the triple helix. Now, again, that's a trivium. Okay, that's a trivium, the trivium of government, private industry, universities, and private industries. Now, what happened when there's a disbalance between private and public? The balance between the private and public is supposed to be mediated by the universities.
Right.
Okay? Because the private is always going to want more and more and more for them, and them. This is egotistical. It's capitalistic. It's the individual has to be constrained by the public. The public in the government has to set the rules of proper engagement, of respect, the rules of proper engagement. Doesn't have to monopolize. It has to give the freedom to the individual to assert its creativity. But the colleges were given the power. And this is what FDR did with Vannevar Bush. Vannevar Bush hired MIT to take all that secret knowledge that they gathered, the intelligence that they gathered in secret, right? This is the war secrets. They didn't keep it secret. No, MIT created 27 volumes and collected all. That's how they defeated. They won the war. They won the war by intelligence. Okay. Now, British learned to decode the Enigma machine. Remember, they decoded the communication of the Germans and the Japanese.
Right.
And these were formidable enemies. Okay. They decoded with radar systems. America created the radar systems, and the Enigma code was created by a scientist, a computer scientist, who then merged. They connected, and then that's how they defeated. It was an intelligence war. And all that knowledge that we gather, the computer principles, the radar systems, all that knowledge, the engineering principles were gathered in a 27-volume set that MIT then distributed to all the engineering schools in America. And that's how America became a superpower. Okay, so yeah, so now what we have is the balance between public policy, university education, and private. Okay. And so when you disturb that balance, and that's how we created the most egalitarian society in history, the golden era of American democracy, until fast forward to the 70s, okay, when, you know, there was a reassertion of private power, and they got involved and manipulated to their advantage. And that's how we got the industrial military complex that grew and bulged, and all the trillions and trillions they consumed the public treasury for their own egotistical purposes. And they created wars, and they continue to create wars because it's a war economy. They confused the conversion of knowledge, the principle that FDR had instituted, which the conversion of public treasury, of public money in the service of knowledge. And this is what Peter Drucker talks about. They confuse that with public money in the service of private power. And this is where the struggle, we're in that struggle today. But MIT reasserted its authority in its responsibility to the public by opening up. You know, some people say, okay, why are you giving out freely $300,000 curriculum? Shouldn't you be utilizing it for private gain the way you were 50 years? No, they had a pact. This was their responsibility. They had to give back to the American people and to the world that knowledge base. And by the way, it's not just 2,000 courses that are free. The database, DSpace, the largest institutional system of knowledge, is also accessible and free. You can access it. I mean, this is so huge. Most people have no clue. But this is the esoteric underlying knowledge system that has been growing in America. And the people who have explained this to me, of course, is all that esoteric history, because all these things go underneath, they're unsaid, because knowledge is power. And so you have to decode. And again, this is where the training of, you know, is universal. You apply it to anything, politics, you can apply it to any principle of knowledge. You know, it's universal, but it all starts with language. And see, because everything is written in language. Okay?
Yeah.
It is the creative principle in man. And so, yeah, thank you.
This is a great place to pause. We're coming up on that 1 hour. And I always love these conversations. And as we move along and traverse this, in the next episode, I would love to ask you a little bit more about the Freemasonry. I mean, because the bottom line is that they have a hand in a lot of things. And the symbiology is in plain sight. And I love to say hidden in plain sight. It's everywhere. And you have to be aware. And if you're walking around through this world unaware, and it's hidden right in plain sight, right in your face, every single day, you will see symbiology based on history, and you don't know it because you didn't take the time to learn. So I'm going to pause us here. Carlos Concepcion, thank you, thank you, thank you. I don't know if our audience understands the value by which you are bringing forward. I mean, this is what you pay college education coursework for. And I'm just so grateful to have these discussions with you, because you are educating us and we are having that conversation that really allows us to really deep dive and go beyond the generic learning out of text. And again, I love this. So thank you for all that you bring, the wisdom that you bring, the knowledge and the patience that you bring for those of us who are coming up the learning curve and just enthusiastic. And, you know, I'm your initiate and I'm excited about being there, you know, so thank you.
My pleasure, my pleasure. And one thing that you said it, you hit it There's a documentary on YouTube. I'm gonna send you the link to it. It's called Hidden
Okay.
in Plain Sight. And it actually it goes right into the aerial view. Only Google could have revealed this to us in clear architectonic, geometrical, symbolical. The whole thing is beautifully out given. All the symbology. And then there's the Dan Brown book on the keys, unlocking the keys of the the temple,
Yes.
the headquarter of the master temple of the Masons, and how the history of America is intimately connected with the history of the esoteric colleges. And this is what now it's all coming together, and in a clear, formal, honest, transparent, crystalline system of knowledge. Yes.
And if you didn't get that, you're missing a lot. So
Yeah.
thank you so much.
All right.
This has been another episode of The Infinite Way, where spirituality meets humanity. We want to thank Carlos Concepcion for participating with us. If you like what you hear, subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. We are here. We are welcoming Carlos Concepcion back. So if you love this conversation, it will continue. And we thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, the audience and everyone.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.